She was standing on a glass-bottom pier, a red cocktail in her hand, the black water 30 feet below her, and 21 years of running behind her, when he stepped out of the dark and lit a cigarette. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a ghost who'd been counting down. His voice came low, deliberate, close enough that she felt it before she heard it. "They found the ledger, Jess, and they know you're the one who stole it. You have 3 minutes before the cleaners arrive. Run or don't. I've already been paid either way." Before we step into the shadows of today's tale, I want to know who else is awake with us. Drop a comment letting me know what part of the world you're watching from. It's always haunting to see how far these stories travel. Now, she was standing on a glass-bottom pier, cocktail in her hand, the Florida Keys stretched out around her like a postcard she'd never let herself send, when the man who was supposed to be dead stepped out of the shadows, clicked a heavy lighter, and leaned in close. His voice was barely above a whisper. 21 years, Jess. You look exactly like the woman who left me to bleed out in Detroit. They found the ledger, and they know you're the one who stole it. You have 3 minutes before the cleaners arrive. Run or don't. I've already been paid either way. Jessica Gregory's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. The red cocktail caught the moonlight. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there with her heart slamming against the inside of her ribs, staring into the face of the one man she'd spent 2 decades making sure would never find her. 3 women, a 1 private island estate, and 1 live stream that lasted 30 seconds. And put all of them on a list they never signed up for. But here's what Jessica didn't know yet. Leaving that pier wasn't the end of the danger. It was the beginning of it. Because hours later, she would find something written on the bathroom mirror of that luxury suite that would make her realize this was never a misunderstanding. It was never random. This was a debt. And the only way out was through the one man she'd betrayed. If you've ever been the person who sacrificed everything just to keep the peace, the one who disappears so quietly that no one even notices you're gone until something breaks, you are going to feel this story in your bones. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because Jessica's story is about to get under your skin. Meet Jessica Gregory, 39 years old, data entry specialist, remote position, Chicago. The woman nobody calls when they need something, because nobody knows her well enough to call. She has a name that isn't her real name, an apartment with 1 exit she's mentally mapped 17 times, a suitcase she keeps half-packed under the bed, not because she travels, but because she was raised never to be somewhere she couldn't leave in under 4 minutes. Jessica doesn't live in Chicago. She hides in it, has been hiding for 21 years, and she is so good at disappearing that she almost fooled herself. Meet Tasha, 36, social media influencer, the kind of beautiful that needs an audience to feel real. Her phone isn't an accessory. It's an organ. She films everything. Every meal, every sunset. Every moment that might make someone somewhere double tap and confirm that she exists. She went live on that pier without thinking. She always films without thinking. That is the wound and the weapon all at once. Meet Elena, 41, former cop, the quiet one, the steady one. The woman Jessica has sent money to every single month for 11 years out of something she tells herself is guilt, but is actually grief. Because Elena is the sister of the man Jessica supposedly killed the night everything burned down. Jessica kept her close to a tone. What Jessica never once considered was that Elena kept herself close for a completely different reason. 3 women, 3 roles they didn't audition for, and 1 vacation none of them will survive the same way they started it. The estate was breathtaking in the way that only money without apology can be. Private island, glass floors, open-air terraces where the ocean and the sky bled together at the edges, so you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Tasha had found it on a rental site and sent the link at 2 a.m. with 15 exclamation points. Elena had said nothing, which was her version of yes. And Jessica had stared at the screen for a long time before she typed the 2 words she hadn't let herself say in 2 decades. I'm in. She hit send before she could take it back. For the first 4 hours, everything was exactly what it was supposed to be. Champagne on the terrace, salt air so thick and clean it felt like medicine. The particular ease of three women who have lived long enough to stop performing for each other, sprawled across expensive furniture, laughing at nothing, catching up on everything. Jessica sat with her back to the wall. She always sat with her back to the wall, but for the first time in years, she wasn't scanning the room. She was just there, present, breathing. She thought, maybe this is what safe feels like. She thought that exactly 47 minutes before Tasha went live. 72 hours later, the suite was silent in a way that felt wrong. Not the silence of a place at rest. The silence of a place that had been carefully, methodically turned inside out and returned to almost exactly the way it was. Almost. Drawers pulled open and slid shut again. Suitcases unzipped and rezipped. Clothes shifted rather than thrown. Someone had walked through this room slowly, deliberately, looking for something specific. They had taken their time. They had not panicked. And on the bathroom mirror, drawn in Tasha's own lip gloss, the expensive one she'd packed specifically for this trip. A date. May 5th, 2005. The date Jessica Gregory died in a Detroit precinct explosion. The date she'd been someone else ever since. Jessica stood in front of that mirror, her reflection staring back at her. The cocktail dress she'd worn to the pier still on her body, her diamond earrings still in her ears, her hands absolutely, terrifyingly still, and understood with the cold precision of someone who had always known this day would come exactly what that date meant. They didn't need to leave a message. The date was the message. We know who you were, we know where you are, and now you know that we know. Tasha sat on the edge of the bed behind her, hands shaking, a phone face down, not scrolling, not filming, just shaking. Elena stood at the window with her arms crossed and her jaw set, and she was running exit calculations behind her eyes. Jessica could always tell when Elena's cop brain activated because her face went very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes when someone is deciding how bad the situation actually is and how much of that they plan to share. Jessica looked at the date on the mirror. She looked at Elena's reflection, and something cold moved through her that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. But let's go back to where this really started. Before the pier. Before the whisper. Before Jessica Gregory stood in a bathroom on a private island and felt 21 years of running collapse into a single mirror reflection. Let's go back to Chicago, 5 days earlier, because that is where the real story begins. In the apartment with one exit and the half-packed suitcase under the bed, the morning Jessica finally stopped waiting for permission to be alive. Chicago had taught Jessica Gregory how to read a room before she walked into it. The weight of the air. The specific silence that meant a space had been disturbed. The way furniture that looked untouched was never quite at the right angle. She had learned this the way most people learned fear. Not from a textbook, but from surviving the thing that should have killed her. So when she pushed open the door to the suite and felt it, she didn't gasp. She didn't reach for Tasha or call for Elena. She just stood in the doorway with her fingers still on the handle and let her eyes move across the room the way a surgeon moves across a body. Quietly, methodically, cataloging damage. The suite was gorgeous. Floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides, the Florida Keys bleeding into the horizon in every direction. The kind of view that was designed to make you feel like money was a natural state of being. The furniture was white linen and raw wood. The champagne they'd opened 2 hours ago still sat on the coffee table, one glass tipped slightly to the left. Not knocked over. Shifted. Like someone had picked it up and set it down a half-inch from where it had been. Someone had been in here. Someone careful. Jessica stepped inside. The others followed. Tasha first, phone already in hand, her dark eyes darting around the room with the particular anxiety of a woman who'd spent the last 6 hours trying to convince herself that the pier had been a misunderstanding. She was still in her green silk wrap dress, the one she'd worn to photograph herself against the sunset. Her natural hair pinned up with a gold clip that caught the light every time she moved. She looked beautiful and terrified and very, very young in a way that had nothing to do with age. Elena came in last, and she closed the door behind her the way someone closes a door when they want to control who can open it next. Deliberately, quietly, her body already turned sideways to give herself a clear line to the exit. Former cop. Always former cop. Jessica moved through the suite room by room. Bedroom, closet hanging clothes shifted 2 inches to the right. The suitcase under the bed pulled out and slid back with the zipper at a slightly different angle. Bathroom. Her toiletry bag open, the contents rearranged in a way that was almost correct. Almost. A bottle of serum facing the wrong direction. Tasha's makeup bag unzipped on the counter. And the lipstick. The deep, expensive red one Tasha had bought specifically for this trip because she said the color made her feel untouchable, uncapped and missing. Then Jessica looked at the mirror. The number was drawn in long, deliberate strokes. Not rushed, not angry. Careful, like someone who wanted to make sure the message survived. May 5th, 2005. The date a woman named Jessica Alade died in a Detroit precinct explosion. The date a woman named Jessica Gregory was born from the ashes and moved to Chicago and started her very quiet, very invisible, very carefully constructed life. Tasha made a sound behind her. Small, involuntary. The sound of someone realizing the ground beneath them was never solid. Jessica didn't move. She stood in front of that mirror with the red numbers reflecting off the glass and felt something move through her that she hadn't felt in years. Not fear exactly, but the cold recognition of fear that has no more room for surprise. She had always known this was coming. She had structured her entire existence around the knowledge that it was coming. She had just stopped believing it would arrive on a Tuesday night in the Florida Keys while she was holding a cocktail and starting to remember what it felt like to breathe. Elena spoke from behind her, voice flat and controlled. "We need to move." "I know," Jessica said. "Not to another room." Elena's reflection appeared in the mirror beside hers. Lighter skin, hard jaw, gray eyes that had seen every kind of human damage a woman could see in 12 years wearing a badge. "Off the island." "I know that too." Tasha was shaking now. Her fingers wrapped around her own arms, the phone finally, mercifully, face down on the counter. "What does it mean? The numbers?" Jessica looked at the date for a long moment. The red lipstick caught the bathroom light and gleamed like something alive. "It means they know exactly who I am," she said. "And they want me to know that they know." She didn't say the rest. That the date meant they had resources. That resources meant infrastructure. That infrastructure meant this wasn't one man with a grudge. This was organized, funded, patient. This was the syndicate. And the syndicate did not write dates on mirrors to frighten women. They wrote dates on mirrors to send a message that was really only one word: surrender. Jessica reached out and picked up Tasha's lipstick from the counter, capped it, set it down, looked at her own face in the mirror, her dark skin, the fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 10 years ago, the diamond studs in her ears that she'd bought with her first paycheck under the name Gregory as a private act of rebellion, a quiet declaration that she was still here, still herself, still alive despite everything. She had worn white tonight. She always wore white when she was somewhere that scared her. Some old instinct from a life she no longer claimed. The idea that you couldn't disappear in white, couldn't be swallowed by shadow in white, couldn't be mistaken for someone who had given up. She was not giving up. Stephen Donovan had found her. The syndicate had found her. And somewhere on this island, right now, the cleaners he'd mentioned were moving through the dark with a very specific set of instructions. Jessica turned away from the mirror. "Pack what you can carry without a bag," she said. "We leave in 4 minutes." 5 days earlier, Chicago had been the same as it always was. Gray and cold and reliable in the specific way of a city that makes no promises and keeps all of them. Jessica's apartment was on the 14th floor of a building on the north side, a unit she had chosen for its sightlines and its single point of entry, and the fact that the fire escape wrapped around the back wall in a way that gave her 2 exits from every room. She had lived there for 11 years. She had never once hung a photograph on the wall. The apartment was clean in the way of spaces where no one truly lives. Surfaces clear, dishes done, everything at right angles. A couch she had purchased for function, not comfort. A bed with good sheets because she had decided years ago that if she was going to spend her life invisible, she would at least be invisible with good sheets. A desk with 2 monitors, a keyboard, a headset. The entire infrastructure of a woman who processed insurance data for a company she had never visited in person, for colleagues she had never met in a body, in a city she moved through like smoke. She had built this life the way you build a bunker, deliberately, with exits in mind. The routine was the thing that kept her from falling apart. Up at 6. Coffee, black, no sugar, because preferences were a form of identity, and she had been careful about identity for a long time. The work started at 7 and ended when the screens went dark. Groceries ordered online. Dry cleaning dropped at the door. A gym membership at a 24-hour facility where the security cameras faced the wrong direction and the staff changed over every 6 months. She had calculated all of it. She had built a life so ordinary, so frictionless, so relentlessly unremarkable, that the eye moved past it the way the eye moves past beige walls. She had not taken a vacation in 21 years. Not because she couldn't afford it. Not because she didn't want to. Because every destination required a plane ticket that required a name that matched a face that could be photographed and run through a system and matched against a database of women who were supposed to be dead. So she stayed. She disappeared into Chicago. She became the kind of woman no one writes stories about. The kind who shows up and does the work and goes home alone and asks for nothing. The perfect ghost. Then Tasha had sent the link at 2 a.m. with 15 exclamation points and the words, "Private Island, Florida Keys. 5 days, are you in?" Jessica had stared at her screen for a long time. She thought about the bunker, the right angles, the absence of photographs, the good sheets, the 11 years of erasing herself in a city that would not notice if she vanished entirely, because she had already made herself as close to vanished as a living woman could manage. She thought about what it had cost her. Not the money. The money was fine. The data entry paid well, and she spent almost nothing. She thought about the cost in years, in mornings, in the particular hollow ache of a Saturday afternoon when the sun came through the window at exactly the right angle, and the apartment felt so quiet it was almost violent. She thought about her own face in the bathroom mirror on mornings when the gray was heaviest. The way she looked at herself sometimes and couldn't find anything behind her own eyes. She typed, "I don't think I can get away right now." Deleted it. Typed, "Let me check my calendar." Deleted that too. Opened her window. Looked out at the city that had kept her safe and small and alive for more than 2 decades, and felt something she hadn't let herself feel in a very long time. Rage. Quiet, clean, bone-deep rage at the life she had made herself live. At the woman she had agreed to become. At the 21 years she had handed over like payment on a debt she never chose to owe. She typed 2 words and hit send before the fear could catch up to the fury. "I'm in." He had been watching her for 40 minutes before he stepped out of the shadows. Stephen Donovan was not a man who moved without reason. Every step, every pause, every shift of weight had been trained into him over years of operating in spaces where miscalculation meant a body count. He had stood at the far edge of the pier in the dark where the light from the estate didn't reach, and he had watched Jessica Gregory stand with her cocktail and her girls in the particular stillness of a woman who had been running for so long she had learned to run while standing perfectly still. She hadn't changed. That was the first thing that hit him. Harder than he'd prepared for. 21 years. He had expected her to look different. Weathered by the hiding, hollowed by the years, the way long fear eventually carves itself into a face and stays. But she was still herself in all the ways that mattered. The set of her jaw. The way she held her body with a quiet authority that most people missed because they were too busy looking at the white dress and the earrings and the cocktail glass, and not at the eyes. He had never made that mistake. He had always looked at her eyes first. They were moving tonight. Alert. Even here, Even supposedly relaxed, she was cataloging the pier in quadrants. He could tell by the way her gaze swept and settled, swept and settled. Old habit. His habit. He had taught it to her in a different city, in a different life, and apparently she had kept it the way you keep the skills that saved you and nothing else. He clicked the lighter, not because he needed the flame, because he wanted to see her react before she knew it was him. She didn't flinch, not visibly, but her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the stem of the cocktail glass, and her weight shifted a fraction of an inch to the left, toward the pier railing, toward the water, toward the exit she had already mapped before she ever walked out here. She was good. She was always good. He stepped out of the dark. Close. Too close for a stranger, which was the point. But close enough that she couldn't turn without turning into him. He let her feel his presence before he spoke. The warmth of a body in the night air, the smell of expensive tobacco, and something colder underneath it. Her reaction was extraordinary. Every instinct she had fired at once. He could see it move through her like a current, watch it hit the surface of her composure and disappear. She didn't spin, didn't scream, didn't run. She turned slowly, chin up, the cocktail glass steady in her hand, and she looked at him the way she had always looked at things that frightened her. Directly, without blinking, as though eye contact alone was a refusal to be afraid. She was stunning in the moonlight. Dark skin warm against the white of the dress, diamond earrings catching fire from the estate lights behind her. Her lips parted just enough to show she was human underneath all that control. Her eyes, brown, almost black, wide now with the shock she wouldn't let her body show anywhere else, hit him like something physical. He had not prepared for that either. 21 years, Jess. His voice came out low, controlled, exactly as he intended. You look exactly like the woman who left me to bleed out in Detroit. She didn't speak. She held his gaze and he felt the full weight of it. The years between them, the blood, the lie she had built her entire life on. They found the ledger. He watched her absorb it. Watched the specific way her face changed when something she had been dreading confirmed itself. Not collapse, never collapse, just a tightening at the corners of her eyes, a barely perceptible stillness in her jaw. They know you're the one who stole it. You have 3 minutes before the cleaners arrive. He held her gaze. Run, or don't. I've already been paid either way. What happened next was not what he'd expected, and he had been expecting a lot of things. She looked at him for a long moment, long enough that he felt the seconds burning through his 3-minute window. And then she said very quietly, "You look terrible, Stephen." He stared at her. "You've lost weight." Her eyes moved across his face with clinical precision. "Your color is wrong, and your left hand hasn't stopped moving since you stepped out of the dark." She tilted her head a fraction. "How long have you known?" The question landed somewhere precise and painful. He said nothing. "The diagnosis?" she said. "How long?" The night stretched between them, thick and salt-aired and combustible. He hadn't told anyone. Not the syndicate. Not his handler. Not the men currently closing in on the island with instructions he had written himself. He had carried it alone for 4 months in the particular silence of a man who had spent his life being the danger in every room and could not reconcile what it meant to be afraid of his own body. She had seen it in under 60 seconds. He hated her for it. He was devastatingly grateful for it. Both of those things lived in the same breath. 2 minutes, he said. Move. They ran along the back edge of the estate property where the landscaping grew thick and dark and the fairy lights from the main terrace didn't reach. Jessica moved fast and low, muscle memory from a life she had tried to bury. Her heels were off. She'd shed them in the first 10 seconds. The strap snapped loose with 2 sharp twists, and now her bare feet moved over grass and stone and she felt every inch of it and registered none of it because her mind was elsewhere entirely. It was on Elena. Elena ran behind Tasha, 12 feet back, and she ran like a cop. Controlled breath. efficient stride, eyes tracking the perimeter rather than the path ahead. Even now, even in a green silk dress on a private island in the Florida Keys, being herded toward an emergency exit by a man who worked for the syndicate, Elena moved like law enforcement. The thing about law enforcement was that it taught you to track people. Follow them. Know where they were before they knew you were watching. Jessica had been thinking about this for 4 minutes, and it was making her stomach go cold in a way that had nothing to do with the night air. They reached the equipment shed at the eastern edge of the property. Groundskeeping, maintenance, the kind of structure that existed on estates like this to keep the machinery of beauty invisible. Stephen pulled the door, assessed, moved inside. The others followed. He produced a flashlight, and in the thin, hard light, Jessica looked at her trio. Tasha was breathing hard, her gold clip loose, a strand of her natural hair fallen across her face. She looked terrified and present and real in a way she hadn't looked since they'd landed. The performance stripped away by adrenaline. Her brown skin sheened with sweat, her eyes darting between Stephen and Jessica with the raw calculation of a woman trying to determine which threat was more immediate. Elena stood near the door with her arms crossed and her jaw set. Jessica watched her. Elena had not asked a single question since the mirror. Not what does it mean, or who is he, or how do we get off this island? She had simply moved, efficiently, in exactly the right directions, as though she had a map. "There's a service boat," Stephen said, spreading a diagram of the property on a workbench, the edges weighted with a wrench and a can of paint. "Northwest Dock. Maintenance uses it at 6 a.m. We have approximately 90 minutes. That boat gets us to the mainland. From there..." "Check her bag," Jessica said. Silence. Tasha looked up. Stephen looked up. Elena went very, very still. "Jessica." Elena's voice was calm. Too calm. "The second phone." Jessica looked at her directly. "Not the iPhone you use for everything else. The other one. The prepaid you keep in the inside pocket of your carry-on." She held Elena's gaze without blinking. "The one you've been using to make calls you don't want on your record." Tasha's mouth opened. She looked between them. "I don't know what you're..." "Elena." Jessica's voice dropped. Not louder. Lower. The register that meant there was nothing left to perform for. "I have been sending you $4,000 a month for 11 years. I told myself it was guilt. I told myself it was penance for Marcus." She paused. "But you've never once spent it on the things you told me you needed it for. Your apartment hasn't changed in a decade. Your car is the same car. And the therapy you told me about. The clinic exists, but you've never been a patient there." The shed was completely silent, except for the sound of something moving through water outside, somewhere in the dark. "You've been reporting my location." Jessica kept her voice even and precise, the way she kept it when the thing she was saying was so large she couldn't afford to let it shake her. Not constantly, just periodically. Enough to keep them interested, not enough to get me killed because a dead woman pays nobody. She tilted her head. "The checks kept coming as long as I kept breathing. How long have you known who I was?" Elena's eyes were gray and flat and terribly honest. She didn't deny it, and that was how Jessica knew it was all true. Because Elena had the particular stillness of a woman who had been carrying something heavy for so long, she was almost relieved to put it down. "Since the beginning," Elena said. Tasha made a sound like the air had left her body. "Marcus didn't die in that explosion," Elena continued. Her voice was stripped of everything except the fact itself, bare and sharp as wire. "You know that. He lost 3 fingers and his left eye, and he has lived in Guadalajara for 19 years under a name nobody knows. And he has hated you every single day." She paused. "So have I." Jessica felt it land. All of it. 11 years of phone calls, of birthday remembrances, of late-night conversations when Elena cried about her brother and Jessica listened and carried the guilt and wrote the check. 11 years of a friendship that was actually a leash. She didn't cry. She wanted to. Somewhere deep and private and unavailable to this room, she wanted to. Instead, she looked at Stephen. "How long until they know we're not in the suite?" 20 minutes, maybe less. She picked up her shoes from the floor where she'd set them, gripped them by the straps, looked at Elena one final time. "Walk in front of me," she said. "Don't stop. Don't speak. And if you reach for that phone, I will make a decision I cannot take back." Elena walked. The lighthouse had been decommissioned in 2009, which meant the power was off and the dock was officially closed, and the only people who used it were the kind of people who needed a place the official record had forgotten about. Stephen knew it the way he knew most things. Not because someone told him, but because he had spent the better part of his adult life learning to locate the spaces that existed between the lines of maps. He got them there in 40 minutes across water that was black and calm and indifferent to all of them. Inside, the lighthouse smelled of salt and rust and the particular damp of places that have been left to remember themselves alone. Stephen had a battery lantern and a go bag that he pulled from a hollow in the wall of the lower room with the ease of someone retrieving something he'd cached himself. Water, a burner phone, a first aid kit, 2 protein bars that he handed to Tasha without comment, and she took them without her usual performance of not needing things. Jessica sat on the iron steps of the spiral staircase, her bare feet on cold metal, her white dress gray in the lantern light. She looked at the room with the same steady, cataloging attention she applied to everything. But her hands were in her lap and she was looking at them sometimes. Just for a second. Just long enough that Stephen noticed. He sat across from her. Not close. Not far. The distance of a man who had learned to measure space in terms of what it communicated. "You need to tell me about the diagnosis," she said. "That's not the priority right now." "It is for me." She looked up. Her eyes in the low light were very dark and very direct, and they did something to the inside of his chest that he had no name for and no use for, and could not seem to stop. "Because whatever you came here to do, whether it was to bring me in or warn me or something in between, I need to understand how much time you're working with. How much time we're working with." He looked at her for a long time. Stephen Donovan was 44 years old, and he had spent 23 of those years in service to a global syndicate that had no retirement plan and no sentimentality, and valued him exactly as much as he was useful. He had done things he would not describe aloud. He had made choices that had narrowed his world down to a point. And 4 months ago, a doctor in a very clean private clinic in Montreal had shown him a scan and used a word that closed every remaining door. 18 months. Possibly less. He had not been afraid. That was the strangest part. He had sat in that clean clinic chair and looked at the scan and felt nothing. Or not nothing. Something more like recognition. Like a man who has been walking toward a destination for years and finally sees the sign. "Pancreatic," he said. "Stage 3, possibly 4. They aren't certain of the boundary." Tasha inhaled sharply from the corner of the room. Elena said nothing. Jessica looked at him with an expression he could not read completely, which was a new experience because he could usually read everything. Grief, anger, and underneath both of those, something more complex. Something he had no right to find there and couldn't stop noticing. "So they used it," she said. "The syndicate. They used the timeline. Told me I was already dead, so I had nothing to lose by bringing you in. That a dying man makes the best hunter because he has no future to protect." He paused. "They weren't wrong about the logic. But they were wrong about what you do with it." He looked at her. She was looking back at him with the full weight of herself, and it occurred to him that this was the thing that had undone him 21 years ago as well. The particular quality of Jessica's attention. The way she looked at you like she was reading something true beneath the performance. Like she saw the version of you that existed before the damage. "I faked your death," he said. "In Detroit. You know that now." "I know." "You didn't know then? You thought you escaped on your own?" His jaw tightened. The explosion was real. Marcus's injuries were real. Your escape was not entirely your own. I pulled 2 people off your trail and I bought you 4 hours and I told myself it was operational. That a live sparrow was more valuable than a dead one. That the codes in your memory were a long game. He stopped. It wasn't operational. The lighthouse groaned around them. Wind off the water, pressing at the old glass. Why are you telling me this now? Her voice was very quiet. Because I'm dying, he said. And I find I have very little patience left for lying about things that mattered. She held his gaze. He held hers. And in the space between them, the rust and the salt and the lantern light and 21 years of choices that had led them to a decommissioned lighthouse on an island that was closing in around them, something shifted. Not resolved. Not safe. Just honest. Devastatingly, dangerously honest. Elena's voice cut through the dark from across the room, cold and unbothered. This is a beautiful moment. They're going to find this location in approximately 6 hours. Stephen stood. Then we have 5.5. He looked at Jessica. Rest. I'll take first watch. A pause. And Jess. She looked up. I'm not here to bring you in. She held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she lay back on the iron steps, crossed her arms over her chest, and closed her eyes. Not because she was safe. Because she had decided to choose rest over fear, the same way she had always chosen function over feeling. And he was beginning to understand that in Jessica Gregory, those were never separate things. He stood at the window and watched the dark water and tried not to think about the way she had looked at him. He was not entirely successful. Dawn came in sideways through the lighthouse glass, thin and gray, the kind of light that revealed without warming. Stephen had let the others sleep and watched the perimeter alone, and when the light changed, he came back inside and set the burner phone on the iron step beside Jessica's hand. She was already awake. She had been awake for an hour. He could tell by the quality of her stillness. She slept loose, even here, even under this kind of pressure. Something vulnerable in the set of her jaw in sleep that disappeared the moment she was conscious. He had noticed the difference at 20 minutes past 4 and had not looked at her again after that because he was not the kind of man who watched sleeping women and he was not going to start. There's something you haven't told me, she said. Not a question. Multiple things, he agreed. Start with why they want me alive. He sat on the bottom step, a level below her, forearms on his knees, hands loose. The lantern was low. In the gray morning light filtering through salt-crusted glass, his face was drawn but composed, the face of a man who had made peace with the weight of what he was about to say. The ledger doesn't exist, he said. She went still. The physical document, the accounts, the routing numbers, the names. There is no ledger. There never was. That story, the theft, the missing book, the codes. It was a construction. It was built around you to explain why you mattered, because the truth is something the syndicate has never been able to admit to itself or anyone else. He paused. You are the ledger. The lighthouse was completely silent. Photographic memory, he continued, is not unusual enough to build a criminal empire around. Lots of people have it. What makes you different is what happened in the 48 hours before the Detroit explosion. You were in that precinct, Jess. You were in the building for 2 days while Vasquez's entire operation ran through the facility being processed and documented. Names, account numbers, crypto wallet addresses, organizational charts, operational protocols. He held her gaze. You absorbed all of it. Not intentionally. But your memory kept it anyway, the way it keeps everything. Her expression was very controlled. Only her hands gave her away. She had pulled them into her lap and laced her fingers together with a pressure that was turning her knuckles pale against her dark skin. And the tattoo, he said. What tattoo? The one in your iris. He held her gaze. Microscript, visible only under a specific UV frequency. It was done while you were sedated during the extraction from Detroit. Before I handed you your new identity. Before Chicago, before all of it. The vault coordinates. The master key for a multi-billion-dollar crypto vault that the syndicate has been building for 20 years. He paused. You have been walking around for 21 years as a bank. The most secured bank in the world because the security was that you didn't know you were carrying it. She looked at him for a long time. Something moved through her face. Not shock. She had moved past the bandwidth for shock sometime around 4 in the morning. But something raw. Rage, and underneath the rage, a grief so quiet it barely made a sound. They put something in my body, she said, without my knowledge. Yes, while you were present. A pause. Yes, and you. I didn't know what they were doing until after. His jaw tightened. I was told it was a tracking device. Standard protocol for high-value assets going underground. By the time I learned the truth, you were already Jessica Gregory, and I had no way to reach you that wouldn't put you in immediate danger. He didn't look away. I should have found a way. I know that. Tasha had woken up somewhere in the middle of this and was sitting very still in the corner with her knees pulled to her chest, her phone gripped in both hands but face down, the viral video and the million views in the comment section and all of it suddenly, devastatingly real. Her beautiful face was stripped of its usual warmth. The influencer's practiced ease replaced by the expression of a woman confronting the specific weight of accidental catastrophe. If they catch me, Jessica said, they take my eyes. Yes. And if I die, the vault codes die with you. They can't risk it, which is the only reason you have survived every close call for 21 years. Because there are standing orders across every faction. She comes in alive. Only alive. He leaned forward. The orders came from the top, Jess. The very top. She looked at him. Your father, he said. The word fell into the room like something dropped from a height. Elena looked up from across the room. Even she, with her gray, calculated stillness, went fractionally more still. Jessica's face did something complex and terrible in private. She pressed her lips together, breathed through her nose once, slowly. Then she unclenched her fingers from each other and set her hands flat on her thighs. He's alive, she said. He was never not alive. The man you thought you killed in the house on Gratiot Avenue, the blood, the gunshot, the collapse. It was a performance. He staged his own death to give himself operational freedom. The grief, the guilt, the reason you ran, it was manufactured. It was a leash, Jess, just like Elena. His voice was quiet, precise. He has been the one managing your quiet life in Chicago for 11 years. The data entry job, the firm that hired you, is owned by a shell company 3 layers deep. Your salary has always been his money. Your apartment was chosen by his people. Your entire invisible life was a terrarium. Beautiful, safe, and completely controlled. Jessica stood up. She didn't pace. She stood at the window and looked at the gray water and the thin morning light, and she held herself perfectly still with the rigid control of a woman who was deciding, in real time, what kind of person she was going to be on the other side of this information. He watched her. Her profile against the lighthouse glass, the clean line of her jaw, the earrings she still wore, the white dress gray in the dawn light, her hands at her sides, fingers slowly curling and uncurling, was the most honest thing he had seen in 21 years. Then we burn it all down, she said. Her voice was very quiet, very certain. He stood. That's what I was hoping you'd say. The modernist mansion on the cliff edge belonged to a man named Hargreaves, who had been dead for 6 months and whose estate had not yet been settled. Which meant the power was on, and the security system was technically active, and the building existed in a legal limbo that made it simultaneously private property and no one's property. The kind of place Stephen Donovan could access, and the syndicate's lawyers could never officially acknowledge searching. They reached it at dusk on the second day, after 36 hours of moving through the mainland in pieces. Borrowed car, hotel room paid in cash, a 4-hour stretch in a roadside diner where Tasha ate a full breakfast at 2 in the morning with the focused silence of a woman recalibrating everything she thought she understood about the world. The mansion was extraordinary and terrible in the way of things designed to make human beings feel small. 3 stories of glass and reinforced steel on a limestone cliff above the Atlantic, the walls transparent on every side so that the interior was visible from every angle, lit from within by track lighting that couldn't be turned off without cutting the main power. A glass house. Nowhere to hide. Nowhere to become invisible. Jessica had chosen it deliberately. Stephen had understood why when she explained it, and understanding it had not made him like it. And he had gone along with it anyway because she was right. And he had spent enough of his life in this world to recognize when someone had found the kind of play that only works once and is either brilliant or suicidal, and often both. They had 40 minutes before the syndicate's tactical team arrived. He knew this because Elena told them, because Elena, with the cold pragmatism of a woman who had finally chosen a side and chosen to be useful on it, had used the prepaid phone to make one last contact and had learned the timeline and had given them the number without being asked for it. Jessica had looked at Elena for a long moment when she said it, not with gratitude, with the particular expression of a woman filing information away in the photographic memory that had defined and endangered and imprisoned her entire life. "Good," she had said. Nothing else. Now they were inside the glass house with 40 minutes and Tasha's phone and a plan that relied entirely on the thing that had destroyed them. The camera, the live stream, the ability to put a face in front of a million people in real time. "Walk me through it again," Stephen said. Jessica stood at the center of the main room, the Atlantic black and massive through 3 walls of glass around her. She was still in the white dress, still in the diamond earrings, her dark skin warm under the track lighting. She had washed her face at the last hotel. She had pulled her hair back with a clip she'd borrowed from Tasha. She looked like herself. Not the ghost, not the data entry woman, not Jessica Gregory of Chicago. She looked like the woman she had been before Detroit, before the name change, before the terrarium, like the sparrow. "Tasha goes live," she said. "Maximum quality. I stand here, exactly here, where they can see me from every approach angle through the glass." I start reciting. The codes. The first sequence. Enough to prove I have them. Enough to confirm to every faction watching that I'm not a ghost. Not a rumor. I'm a woman on camera in real time with the keys to the vault, and I will release every sequence to every person watching if I am touched. She looked at him. A dead woman doesn't finish a live stream. A woman in custody doesn't look this calm. The only version of me that is safe to kill is a version of me that has no audience. And I am about to make that impossible. Your father will be there. I know. He won't negotiate. He's not going to get the chance. Her eyes moved to Tasha. Tasha was standing with her phone in both hands and the particular focused stillness of a woman who had spent her entire life performing for cameras and had finally found a reason to use it for something that mattered. No performance now, just presence. Her dark eyes steady, her chin up, the influencer's instinctive relationship with a lens repurposed into something larger than content. "I can do this," Tasha said. It wasn't a question. "I know you can," Jessica said. 12 minutes later, the lights at the base of the cliff bloomed. 3 vehicles, tactical, moving without urgency, which was worse than urgency. It meant they were confident. It meant they thought this was already finished. Tasha went live. The viewer count climbed in real time in the corner of the screen. Hundreds, then thousands, an algorithm that had always rewarded her face now serving something entirely different. The live video pushing through feeds and across platforms with the velocity of content that felt raw, unscripted, real. Because it was. Because there was nothing more raw than this. Jessica stepped into frame. The tactical team was 40 feet from the door when Stephen's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, looked at her. 500,000 viewers, he said. She didn't smile. She held the camera with her eyes and began to speak. The first sequence took 45 seconds. She recited it in the flat, precise tone of a woman who had spent 21 years being nothing, having nothing, holding everything inside herself where no one could reach it. And now she opened the door and let the world see what was inside. Numbers, sequences, the key to 20 years of accumulated darkness. Outside the glass, the tactical team stopped. She could see their communications equipment lighting up, the calls going out, the chain of command reaching upward through the hierarchy with a speed born of panic. Because a dead man's switch isn't a bluff when the woman holding it is already on camera with 500,000 people watching and nothing left to lose. The door opened. He was shorter than she remembered. That was the first thing. Her father, Marco Alade, the man who had built his empire on her memory and staged his own death to free himself from every obligation, except the one he could exploit, walked into the glass house with 2 men behind him, and the confident ease of a man who had never once in his life accepted that something was over. He looked at her. She looked at him. "Jessie," he said. The old name. Her real name. He said it with warmth, which was the most terrifying thing about him. The warmth was real. He had always loved her in his way. It had simply never occurred to him that love and ownership were different things. 3 million viewers, Tasha said from behind the camera, her voice perfectly steady. And climbing. Marco's jaw tightened. His eyes moved to the phone, to Tasha, to Stephen standing at the far wall with the controlled stillness of a man who had already made his final calculation. Then back to Jessica. "This is not how we end this," he said. "I know," she said. "This is how we begin it." She held his gaze and recited the second sequence. The tactical team outside did not move. Marco's composure fractured. Not collapsed, never collapsed, but fractured, a hairline crack moving through the surface of him. He looked at his daughter in her white dress under the track lighting with the Atlantic black and vast behind her, and he looked at the phone in Tasha's hands, and he looked at the viewer count climbing in the corner of the screen, and he understood what she had done. She had made herself undeniable, visible, irremovable. She had taken the thing that had imprisoned her, the memory, the codes, the vault, the reason she was worth keeping alive, and turned it into armor. She had become too public to disappear. "Sit down, Papa," she said softly. "We have a lot to talk about." And in a glass house on a cliff above the Atlantic, with the whole world watching, Jessica Gregory, born Jessica Alade, called the Sparrow, ghost and prisoner and woman who had waited 21 years to finally stop running, waited for her father to understand that the debt was paid. Every single cent of it. She didn't burn the world because she was angry. She burned it because she was finally, completely, devastatingly done being invisible. And the fire was gorgeous. That's the end of our journey for tonight. Or is it? Leave a comment below with your location. I want to see where this story is haunting people right now. And if you feel like someone is watching you, you're probably not alone.